Well, good morning. Warm welcome to Grace Church. And I want to especially welcome our Dream Canada friends. Wasn't that wonderful hearing them here this morning? I do want to tell you a Dream Canada story. So about a year ago, I can't quite remember exactly when it was, I spoke in the Dream Canada Chapel on a Wednesday morning, and we had a wonderful time together. A few days later, a big envelope was delivered to me. And in that envelope were about 40 thank you letters from the students of Dream Canada. I've been speaking for maybe 40 plus years. Never in all the time that I've been speaking have I ever had a thank you like that. That's Dream Canada. That's incredible. So wonderful to have Dream Canada with us this morning. Well, Happy New Year. Hope everyone had a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful New Year's. It is really an honor, it's a privilege to speak on the first Sunday of 2024. I think this is actually one of the most special Sundays of the year as we contemplate the year ahead. In some ways, the first Sunday of the year is like leaving on a long vacation. When the day finally comes, you're going to start your journey. And at that moment, there's always this kind of mixed bag of emotions. There's excitement, the adventure, what's going to happen on your vacation. But there's also uncertainty. You worry about maybe missing your connecting flight in Chicago. What if the weather was really bad? Did we pack the right things? What if we got sick? Did we have enough travel insurance? Starting a long journey, a long vacation, has these mixed emotions. Well, I think starting a new year, it's exactly the same. There's kind of an excitement. It's wonderful to think about what might happen in the year ahead. What good things are going to happen in 2024? But there's also uncertainty. Will the Canucks actually win the cup this year? We don't know. Will we go into recession or not? What will happen in the Middle East? Will Donald Trump become president again? We don't know. There's a ton of uncertainty as we start 2024. And no doubt, there's a fair amount of worry. There's a fair amount of anxiety, too, as we start the year. As I thought about speaking on this very special Sunday and the different emotions that we have as we start the year, I thought of a number of different topics. I thought perhaps a message on hope. We need hope as we begin the 2024 journey. Or how about prayer? If we ever needed prayer, 2024 is it. Or how about a message on a resolution to be back to the Bible, to spend more time in God's Word in 2024? Those would all be good topics, and I debated those for a while. But eventually, as I was thinking about this message, I asked myself, is there someone in the Bible who lived through a time that was similar to 2024? Someone we could learn from, we could study how she or he navigated through times like what we're going through. And I decided that we would try to take some lessons for 2024 from a man who lived at a time that was quite similar to ours, when political leaders promised one thing and did another. A time when anti-Semitism was much worse than even today. a man who lived with supply chain disruptions, a man who lived with war and threats of war almost on a daily basis, and a man who lived through numerous climate events, even pillars of fire in the skies. Of course, the man that I'm referring to is Moses. As Moses journeyed through the excitement, I'm sure there was, the blessings, but the uncertainty and the anxiety of his times, not unlike 2024, there was one characteristic. There was one thing that was consistent in Moses' life. Moses lived out his faith. Moses consistently put his faith into action. And this is my topic. This is our encouragement for us here at Grace Church as we start 2024. In this exciting, uncertain, worrying year, let's resolve together to live out our faith. In 2024, let's resolve to put our faith into action. If we were talking out in the foyer and you said, hey, Kevin, how's Christmas? You know, it wouldn't have taken very long until I talked about grandchildren, for sure. And we would have talked about, spending time with our wonderful grandchildren over Christmas. And just suppose as we're talking, you kind of stopped me and you said, Kevin, do you love your grandchildren? And I would, of course, almost be offended by that, and I would go, well, of course I do. But supposing I said that, I love my grandchildren, but I never spent time with them, never played with them, never read them stories, never talked to them on the phone, forgot their birthdays, and never prayed for them. I think you would quickly say, Kevin, really? Do you really love your grandchildren? You see, true love is something that we just naturally expect to be demonstrated. We just naturally expect that love will be put into action. Without action, we have to question if the love is real at all. I have always loved Hebrews 11. And Dr. Barkman preached on it, you'll remember, for a number of weeks. And while he was preaching, I kind of fell in love with Hebrews 11 all over again. And I read it and I reread that great faith chapter. And it became apparent to me that faith is exactly the same as love. Faith is something that we would just naturally expect to be demonstrated. True faith is something that will result in action. Without action, you have to question, is the faith real at all? We often refer to Hebrews 11 as the faith chapter. I don't think that's right. I think we should refer to Hebrews 11 as the faith in action chapter. Here's what I mean. Verse 4, we discover that Abel, son of Adam and Eve, part of that very first family, we're told that he was a man of faith. But notice, it doesn't stop there. We're told he had faith and he lived it out, bringing a better sacrifice to God. Verse 7, Noah had faith. Does it stop there? Or are we just told Noah was a man of faith? No, we're told he lived it out. He put it into action. When he was warned about coming judgment, he built an ark as God had directed. In verse 8, we discover that Abraham was a man of faith. And are we simply told Abraham had faith? No, we're told he had faith and he lived it out. When he was called to go to a new land, he willingly went, even though he didn't know where he was going. If we had read verses 9 to 19 about Abraham, we would have discovered that Abraham was constantly putting his faith into action. He was living out his faith. Verse 29, we read of Jacob being a man of faith. Are we just told he's a man of faith? No, He put his faith into action. When he was dying, he blessed Joseph's sons, recognizing the future blessing that was to come through them. Verse 22, Joseph, man of faith. Does it stop there? No, he was a man of faith and he lived it out. He put it into action. Even at the end of his life, we're told, he reminded his sons that one day Israel would leave Egypt, and he gave instructions as to how his bones should be taken with the people. Faith in action. Now, I want us to stop just for a second. I do not want to be misunderstood in my message. There is something I want us to be absolutely crystal clear about. I am absolutely not talking about works, about action being needed for salvation. We all know the wonderful verse in Ephesians 2, by grace you have been saved through faith. And that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. But this morning, if you are a Christian, if you are a believer in Jesus, then God's desire is that in 2024, we would put our faith into action. We would live out our faith, real, living faith. This morning, we're going to settle in on verses 23 to 29, and we're going to use just one of the people of faith of Hebrews 11, Moses, to learn what I hope are 4 lessons for us about living out our faith in 2024. So if you're ready, let's go. Lesson number 1. Living our faith in 2024 means overcoming fear and taking some risks for God in 2024. Verse 23 takes us back to Exodus 1. And I think we all know this story well. Because of Joseph, the Israelites are living in Egypt, and they had grown and they'd become a large people, a large number. And Pharaoh is worried. What if there's a war and the Israelites join our enemy and we now have an enemy from within? And Pharaoh comes up with a plan. He says, we'll put the Israelites under extreme labor, make them build us treasure cities, treat them ruthlessly, and then they won't prosper. But the strategy fails, and the Israelites actually multiply. Pharaoh then goes to strategy number 2. He gives an order. He makes it the law of the land that if an Israelite boy is born, he must be immediately killed. He must be thrown in the river. Remember who Pharaoh was, the most powerful man on earth at that time. To defy his order, his law, would mean extreme punishment, probably death. Here you have Moses' parents, that they give birth to this wonderful little baby. Just imagine that moment for them. Are they going to defy the law of the land? Are they going to defy the most powerful person on earth and face death? Or will they kill their child and defy God's law? What a horrible position to be in. Moses' parents, they decide that they're going to trust God, that they are going to defy the order of Pharaoh, and they are going to hide Moses. And I love verse 23. It says, they were not afraid. Moses' parents lived out their faith. They put their faith in action, overcoming fear and taking a great risk for God. Interesting, in verse 27, exactly the same thing is said about Moses. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king, Pharaoh's anger. Moses, like his parents, he lived out his faith by trusting God and overcoming fear. Now, it would be really fun to take a survey. I wish we had time to do this in our audience and say, what are the things you're afraid of? Every one of us has a phobia, a fear about something, whether it's snakes or spiders Or for some people, it's flying. Maybe after what happened yesterday, people should be more afraid about flying. Or maybe it's crocodiles. Whatever it is, people are afraid of many different things. And sometimes we kind of laugh at those fears. But fear can actually be debilitating in our spiritual lives. Fear can take away our ability to be missional. I can't teach a Sunday school class. I would be afraid. I couldn't possibly lead a growth group, a Bible study. I would be afraid. I can't speak to my neighbor about Jesus. I have no idea how I would frame the conversation. I am afraid. I couldn't possibly have people into my home and show hospitality. What if the dinner didn't work out right? I would be embarrassed. I am afraid. A few years ago, I attended a conference for youth leaders, and one of the speakers talked about a survey that had been done with elderly people. And these elderly people were asked, if you could do 3 things in life over again, if you could just change 3 things in your life, what would those 3 things be? And these were the 3 things. Number 1 on the list, I would take more time to reflect. We all kind of just rush through life. And as these people are looking back, they're saying, I just wish I took more time just to reflect. Number 2, focus more on things that live on after you die. Focus on eternal things. But here was number 3. This was number 3 on the list. I would take more risks for God. If I could live life over again, I would take more risks for God. In Joshua 1, Moses has just passed away, and Joshua realizes that now the burden of leading Israel at a very, very difficult time, the burden was his. And I'm pretty sure the task seemed pretty overwhelming to Joshua. But in verse 9 of chapter 1 of Joshua, God speaks to him and he says, Joshua, be strong, courageous, do not be afraid. If you actually study that word, it's even a little stronger than afraid. The word is terrified. He says, Joshua, don't be terrified. Do not be discouraged. Why? The Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. Joshua, set fear aside. Trust me, take some risks with me. The writer of Hebrews, I think he sums it up so well, chapter 13, verse 6. We can say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. The writer is saying, set fear aside. Trust the Lord our helper. Take risks for God. Moses' parents and then Moses, they lived out their faith. They put their faith in action. They weren't paralyzed with fear. They were willing to take risks for God. This is my challenge for us as we enter 2024. Let's be a people who live out our faith, who put our faith in action, who are willing to set fear aside and take some risks with God. Lesson number 2. Living our faith in 2024, we need to understand the cost. Perhaps one of the all-time favorite Sunday school stories is how Moses is discovered by Pharaoh's daughter and how he's eventually adopted and he becomes the grandson of Pharaoh. Moses in Exodus 2, wow, he had it made. He had education. He had immense wealth. And as the son of the most powerful person on earth, he had enormous power. By most analysis, the richest person in the world today is Musk, Elon Musk. With his Tesla and Twitter or X and his SpaceX holdings, he's reported to have a net worth of around $220 billion. Staggering. Bill Gates, For many years, he was the richest person in the world, but I feel so sad for him. He's now fallen to number 6. He has a net worth of only $115 billion. It's really sad. Moses, in some ways, was ahead of Elon Musk or Bill Gates. Because in addition to great wealth as the grandson of Pharaoh, he also had the immense power. Well, you know the story. In the second half of Exodus 2, Moses sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and his heart goes out to his Hebrew brother, and he makes a choice. And Moses jumps in and he intervenes on behalf of the Israelite, and in the struggle that follows, the Egyptian was killed. And when Pharaoh finds this out, Pharaoh wants to kill his adopted grandson. And Moses is forced to flee. And he goes and he lives in the desert really with nothing. All his power, his wealth, it's gone. Maybe to use a modern analogy, Moses went from being Elon Musk to living under the Granville Street Bridge in one day. Moses was willing to pay that price. Listen to the verse that David read for us again, verse 24. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than all the treasures of Egypt. Moses said, living out my faith, putting my faith in action is more important to me than all the treasure in Egypt. And Moses was willing to pay a very heavy cost to put his faith into action. As I was preparing yesterday for this message, as you should always do when you're speaking, I was doing some introspection, and I had to ask myself, how far would you go, Kevin, to put your faith into action? Rick, where are you, Rick? Rick just achieved an enormous milestone. Rick just completed, Rick Sutcliffe, Dr. Rick Sutcliffe, he completed 40 years of teaching at Trinity Western University. Isn't that incredible? 40 years, yes. I have been at Trinity for a mere 30 years. David, I don't know how many years it is for you. 30 as well. So I think if you asked all of us, if you asked David or Rick or myself, we would all admit something to you. As we teach longer, we kind of forget the students. It's just hard to remember every student. I've taught thousands of students now at Trinity, and I'll bump into them on the street, and I just don't really remember who they are. Sometimes that's very, very difficult. Well, there is one student who just so stands out of the thousands of students. This is a student who, as he was in my law class, he kind of fell in love with law and eventually decided he wanted to become a lawyer. And so he wrote the LSAT exam. He did phenomenal. He was accepted at the University of Washington, where he got great marks. He was asked to clerk at the U.S. court. And then he received a very, very prestigious position with a Seattle law firm, and he had a brilliant legal career ahead of him. But God was working in his life, and God said, I would really like you to do something different. I would like you to take your law degree, and I'd like you to move to Thailand, and I'd like you to join the International Justice Mission, and I'd like you to use your legal skills to try to help free women from the sex trade and horrible abuse in that country. And so my student said, okay. And he gave up a lucrative Seattle law practice. That's living faith. Now, God doesn't ask all of us to go to Thailand, but he does ask every single one of us, if we are a true believer in Jesus, he asks us to put our faith into action. This is my challenge for us today. In 2024, be a people of living faith who do understand that living our faith does have a cost. Lesson number 3. living faith, faith in action, is always looking forward. I don't know if you've ever wondered this. How did Moses persevere through those long, lonely years in the desert? In Exodus 2, Moses finds himself far away from the action. Israel is suffering under Pharaoh, and Moses finds himself during that time in the backside of the desert, looking after his father-in-law's sheep. They're not even his own sheep. Here's Moses in the absolute prime years of his life. He's strong, he's well-educated, he is the perfect leader for Israel, and instead of leading the people, he's in the backside of the desert, looking after sheep who aren't even his own. And as 1 year turns to 2, and 2 to 5, and 5 to 10, and 10 years became 20 years, and 20 years went to 40 years. I'm pretty sure there were times of pretty deep discouragement for Moses. I'm pretty sure there were times when Moses would think, is God ever going to use me? Maybe I should just give up. Maybe my faith is really going nowhere. Maybe this is all meaningless. How did Moses persevere? How did he keep going? How did he keep his faith strong for those 40 years in the desert? Have you ever wondered how Moses persevered through the 10 plagues? In Exodus 7, Moses comes to Pharaoh, let my people go. And of course, as we know, Pharaoh refuses. And so because of Pharaoh's refusal, the Nile River and every stream and every pond in Egypt turned into blood. And I'm pretty sure that at that moment, there would have been high excitement with Moses. Now Pharaoh is going to let us go. It's going to happen. We're going to be able to leave Egypt. But as we know, Pharaoh hardens his heart and says no. And I'm pretty sure for Moses, that would have been really tough. And as we read Exodus 7, 8, 9, 10, over and over, Moses asks Pharaoh, let my people go. And when he refuses, another plague falls over Egypt. And no doubt each time Moses thought, surely this is it. Surely this is the time. Pharaoh's now going to let us go, only to have Pharaoh harden his heart and refuse. And that must have been just so incredibly discouraging for Moses. Just think of the 8th plague. Locusts covered the entire country of Egypt. The ground was black from these bugs. We're told in Exodus 10 there were so many locusts that they ate everything. There was nothing green left on a single tree or plant in all of Egypt. And I'm pretty sure that then Moses said, it's gonna happen for sure. Pharaoh's going to let us go, only to have Pharaoh yet again harden his heart. Again, incredibly disappointing to Moses. 8 times a plague and 8 times being told no. I think any one of us would have given up. I might have made it to 3, I think. Maybe 3 times, and then I just would have given up. How did Moses keep going to the 9th and the 10th? Through those 40 years in the desert, how did he persevere through all of that? I think there's a very simple answer. It comes to us in verse 26. He was looking ahead. He was looking ahead to his reward. As he was putting his faith into action, Moses was looking forward. He's looking forward. A few years ago, I was at my desk. At this time, I was in a large law firm in downtown Vancouver, and my phone rang on my desk, and I picked it up, and it was the senior partner in our firm. And he said, Kevin, I need to see you right now in my office. So you don't say no to senior partner. So I ran up the stairs to his office, and he was busy at his desk, and he kind of just looked up at me when I went in. And then after a minute or two, he stopped what he was doing, and he said, Kevin, you're going to run. And I kind of looked at him, but he's the senior partner. So I said, okay, sure. Where do you want me to run? I'll run wherever you want me to run. And he said, you're going to run tomorrow. And I said, where am I going to run tomorrow? And he said, well, he says, here's the deal. He said, our firm is sponsoring the 24-hour charity run at Swangard Stadium. We have a team of 10 lawyers who are entered in that charity run. The idea is that team of 10 lawyers runs constantly for 24 hours to raise money for charity. And senior partner said, we have raised, or I have raised, I think is what he said, I have raised a lot of money, but I'm not going to run. You're going to run. So I couldn't say no to senior partner. So the next day I found myself at Swangard Stadium, and I instantly realized I was in trouble. These other lawyers, 9 other lawyers, typical lawyers, they were so competitive. They were all talking about their times, the times that they had in the last marathon or 10K that they ran. And they were talking about how they were going to be the fastest team. I'm not quite sure how they did that in a charity run, but they were going to be the best team in this charity event. And I began to feel huge pressure. So eventually it was my first time to run, and I was going to show. I was going to be part of the team. And so you did a loop of Swangard Stadium, and I was just going, and I headed out down Boundary Road, and I was just giving it everything I could, but there was a problem. See, I hadn't trained one bit. Not at all. And after about 5 minutes into this, my legs were like jelly. And breath, well, I could hardly get one. Could hardly get a breath. And I began to think, this is awful. I'm going to have to just stop entirely, or maybe I'm just going to have to walk. This is going to be so embarrassing. My legal career is over. This is just the worst thing ever. But as I approached the corner of, it was 49th and Patterson, the organizers of this event have been very smart. They knew there were going to be people like me. And so they had tables set up right along the sidewalk where we were running, and these volunteers had water. And so as I was struggling by, one of them reached out with a glass of water, and I'll never forget what she said. She said, keep looking forward. She pointed and she said, the entrance to the stadium, it's just there. She said, you could do it. Just keep looking forward to the entrance to the stadium. And that kind of gave me a second wind, and I was able to keep going. Moses, I believe he was able to make the choices he did to persevere through the incredible challenges because he was looking forward. Moses wasn't focused on his current situation, but rather on the tremendous future that he had ahead with his God. Those of you who have been at Grace for a while, you'll know I almost every message put this in because it's my favorite verse in Scripture. It's 1 Peter 1:4. We have an inheritance, incorruptible and undefiled, that fades not away, reserved in heaven for you. We have a future ahead, an eternity with Jesus in a place where righteousness prevails, where there's no wars, no sickness, no pain, no suffering, no tears. As a child of God, I have a future ahead with Christ that is beyond anything I could ever imagine. And faith in action, real living faith says, I'm going to keep my eye on that future. Rather than focusing on the challenges I might have today, as hard and as difficult as those challenges might be, I'm going to keep my eyes forward. This is my challenge for us here at Grace. As we start into 2024, let's live out our faith. Let's demonstrate our faith by keeping our eyes looking forward to the tremendous future we have ahead with Christ. Last one. Living our faith in 2024 means trusting even in the tough times. Verse 29, by faith, the people passed through the Red Sea. Dr. Barkman said this last Sunday. He said as he reads his Bible, there's certain scenes where he wishes he could really be there, and I'm exactly the same. There's some places in the Bible where I really wish I could be there. I would have loved to have been there at Jericho when those walls came crashing down. But maybe most of all, I would have loved to have been there in Matthew at the Sermon on the Mount and just sat and listened as Jesus spoke? That would have been incredible. Well, verse 29 is also one of those scenes that I desperately would have loved to be at. Again, we know the story. After the 10th plague, Pharaoh says, okay, go. And Moses and perhaps 2 million people left Egypt. We know from Exodus 12:37 that there were 600,000 men, plus probably a greater number of women and children, so perhaps around 2 million. Chapter 14, we have the account of how Pharaoh changes his mind. He regrets that he has lost his slave labor that the Israelites had provided for many years. And so he reverses his decision, and Pharaoh gathers his vast army, and he pursues after the Israelites. And his army included 600 of the best, the most modern chariots, the best fighting machines of the time. And against that modern army, Moses and the Israelites, they had no chance. To make matters worse, the Red Sea is in front of them. The mountains are on either side. One geographer has described where they were as a geographic cul-de-sac. They were trapped, and they can see the dust of the mighty Egyptian army rapidly approaching. Moses, do you have faith now? If we were to read Exodus 14:13, we see that in one of the most difficult times of Moses' life, he put faith in action. He demonstrated faith. He told the people, don't be afraid. Stand firm. Even at this toughest time, Moses trusted God. And of course, you know the result. The Red Sea parts, the Israelites cross, and when Pharaoh tries to follow, the water rushes in and the mighty Egyptian army is destroyed. I believe that sometimes preachers make a mistake. When they present the good news of Jesus Christ, they sometimes indicate that if you'll come to Jesus, your life will be great. It'll be perfect. Well, God never really promises that. He doesn't promise that our life will be perfect. He does promise He'll never abandon us. He does say He'll be there even at the Red Sea moments, that we can trust Him always. Faith in action says, Lord, I will trust you in 2024, even at the Red Sea. Now, I know many of us have financial, family, work, health challenges, and I don't want to diminish those challenges. I know challenges can be very real and very painful. I'll never forget that day in the July long weekend of 2018 when I tried to get out of bed and I could not walk. I could not walk. And I remember the fear and the anxiety and the uncertainty and the pain. So friends, believe me, I know that life's challenges can be immense. But we do have a great God who loves us beyond measure. And He wants us to know that He is there. In 2024, even at the Red Sea moments, He's going to be there. And His desire is that we would put faith in action, that we would live out our faith by trusting Him in those tough moments of life. So as I finish, this is my prayer for the year ahead, that we would be a people who don't just say we have faith in 2024, but we would be a people who in 2024 put our faith into action, who live out our faith, willing maybe to even take some risks with God, who understand that faith does have a cost, who will always keep our eyes looking forward to that great future we have ahead with Christ. And finally, a people who put their faith into action by trusting even at the Red Sea. Thank you so much.